Good morning. Distinguished guests, eminent governors, professors, economists, and our colleague in the central bank community. Welcome to Tokyo, welcome to BOJ, and most importantly, welcome to BOJ-IMES Conference here. I'm Masaaki Kaizuka, Executive Director in charge of Institute, and I'm going to be the MC whole through the 2 days conference. Looking at the such a rich global representation from United States, Europe, and Asia, it may be too early to say, but I dare to say this conference has already been successful. And at the end of last year's conference, I told you, I think some of you are kind of repeatedly come to this conference. Thank you very much. And I told you at the end of last year's the conference, BOJ initiated the very challenging journey named Broad Perspective Review of Japanese Economy and Monetary Policy under the captaincy of Governor Ueda, which covers 25 years starting mid-90s. The journey will continue for 1 or 1.5 years, and we are still rowing a boat. Today, my colleague from BOJ are very happy to share some of the findings and the lessons we learned during this process of broad perspective review in the following session. And in turn, I very much look forward to your very insightful views and opinions and any voices, any comment, any complaint on our ongoing broad perspective review, which may in turn make a building block for our the final product. So without further ado, I would like to open another chapter of our journey, which is the BOJ-IMES Conference today. So first, I would like to ask the Governor Ueda to deliver us his opening speech. Actually, he is just back from Italy, G7 meetings. So everybody understands how painful to be the governor of a BOJ or any other governor in all over the world. It's a very painful work. But I hope Governor Ueda has some the relaxed time last night, hopefully. So the floor is yours, Governor Ueda, please. Yes.
It is my great pleasure, not a pain, to welcome distinguished speakers and guests to the 29th BOJ-IMES Conference. Excuse me. We would like to thank you all for your participation. I would like to thank my old friend John Taylor, who was the very first Maekawa lecture back in 2008, for coming back to our conference to deliver his second Maekawa lecture later today. While we hold our research conference almost every year, this year's conference is unique in that it is held as part of a broad perspective review of monetary policy. As Kaizuka-san just pointed out, the review aims to further deepen our understanding of various unconventional monetary policy measures over the past 25 years and to gain insights that will be useful for monetary policy making in the future. This conference will cover two main themes: price dynamics and effects of conventional and non-conventional monetary policy instruments. We very much look forward to our lively discussions today and tomorrow to gain further insights into these themes. To set the stage, let me start my remarks with the recent change in our monetary policy framework, followed by my reflection on the BOJ policy over the past 25 years, condensed into 20 minutes. Now, the Bank of Japan decided to terminate most of its non-traditional monetary easing measures at its March 19th meeting in response to improvements in the inflation outlook. Discontinued measures included the yield curve control, YCC, involving a negative short-term policy rate and control of the 10-year JGB yield. Excuse me. And purchases of risky assets such as equity-linked ETFs and J-REITs. Purchases of JGBs are continuing at about the same pace as before, but given redemptions, the amount we hold at the BOJ will stay roughly constant for the time being. Additionally, two types of forward guidance were ended. One stating that the BOJ would continue with quantitative and qualitative monetary easing with YCC as long as it was necessary for hitting the price stability target in a sustainable way. And the other, which promised to continue expanding the monetary base until inflation exceeded 2% and stayed above the target in a stable manner. For further insights into this decision, please take a look at my speech at the Peterson Institute I gave last month. Now, reflecting on the past, the BOJ started using non-traditional easing measures in the late 1990s, with brief interruptions during the year 2000 to 2001, and then 2006 to 2007, when the short-term policy rate became positive. Having been a BOJ board member during the inception and termination of these measures, I would like to discuss their efficacy and limitations. While extensive literature exists on this topic, the BOJ is currently conducting, as I said, a broad perspective review of its experience. So today, I confine myself to informally addressing the perennial question of Japan's struggle to escape a long period of near zero inflation, also known as the zero inflation trap, despite extensive non-traditional monetary policy interventions. This discussion hopefully will serve as an introduction to this conference. Chart 1 shows a simple three-year, let's see. This chart shows a simple three-year moving average of the rate of change in headline CPI. It clearly illustrates the zero inflation trap. Inflation by this measure remained in the small range of, with a few exceptions, remained in the small range of, let's say, 0 plus minus 0.5% from 1996 to 2022, a span of 27 years. I think that the primary explanation for this phenomenon lies in the so-called effective zero lower bound on nominal interest rates. This chart shows that the overnight call market rate fell below 0.5% already by late 1995. By the onset of the zero inflation trap, the BOJ had exhausted its leverage over short-term interest rates as a means of stimulating the economy. I acknowledge potential objections to this assertion. Many central banks, including the BOJ, introduced various non-traditional measures to stimulate the economy, some of which remained in use in Japan until very recently, as I said at the outset. I anticipate presentations during the conference will suggest that some of these measures can effectively overcome the difficulties created by the zero lower bound. Nonetheless, the BOJ's prolonged struggle to escape the zero inflation trap, I think, serves as evidence of the challenges posed by the zero lower bound. I think there is a merit in arguing that the evolving policy framework adopted by the BOJ was at certain points not optimal. For instance, during the initial years of the zero inflation trap, there was no explicit inflation target. In year 2000, the BOJ deliberated whether it should define the price stability as some specific inflation rate, such as zero or a small positive number, but did not reach a consensus at that time. Eventually, in March 2006, the BOJ stated that a range of 0 to 2% with a median of 1% was consistent with its understanding of price stability. It finally introduced the price stability target of 2% in January 2013. With hindsight, an earlier introduction of a clear inflation target could have influenced some of the BOJ decisions. For instance, the decision to terminate the zero interest rate policy in August 2000. At that time, core inflation was still minus 0.5%, while forward guidance on the short rate introduced in April 1999 stated that the bank would continue the zero rate until deflationary concerns were dispelled. The termination may have weakened the efficacy of the forward guidance. Another aspect worth considering is the timing of asset purchases. The BOJ's active acquisition of long-term JGBs happened relatively late compared with the inflation dynamic. While the BOJ began buying more long-term JGBs with the onset of quantitative easing in March 2001, there was no significant increase in its holdings of JGBs until 2013, as shown in this chart. By contrast, the Fed's holdings of treasuries began to rise sharply in early 2009 in response to the global financial crisis. Having said that, it should be noted that, as shown in this chart, the 10-year JGB yield was already below 2% in the late 1990s, while the 10-year Treasury yield was close to 4% when the Fed initiated its large-scale asset purchases. This prompts the question of how much impact larger-scale JGB purchases by the BOJ would have had in the early 2000s. Let me now turn to another possible explanation for the BOJ's difficulties. I think the entrenched nature of how low inflation expectations played a key role. It led to changes in economic agents' behavior, especially the strategic pricing behavior of firms, and in turn prolonged the period of the zero inflation trap. As my colleagues will elaborate later, when firms do not think their peers will raise prices, they think it is best to keep their prices and possibly wages unchanged, even in the face of small changes in costs or demand, making overall inflation or inflation expectations more entrenched at around zero. An economy in this situation may need a large shock to move out of it. The BOJ conducted extensive surveys very recently among firms regarding this, regarding their price wage setting behavior. This table or chart shows some notable findings. Many firms replied that during the period of the zero inflation trap, they were not able to raise prices because their competitors were not doing so. That's the left panel. In contrast, over the last couple of years, the opposite trend has emerged. Please look at the right panel, especially the first and the third answers, replies. Well, there's an element of some circularity here. I guess the important point is that such strategic interaction can give rise to, say, multiple equilibria, or at least diminish the response of prices and wages to positive shocks. This chart shows the rate of change in wages set in the annual spring wage negotiations, which astonishingly remained at virtually zero during 1999 to 2013, reflecting the entrenched nature of the zero inflation trap. However, there's evidence of changes after 2013. First, wages started to rise modestly in response to the new easing policy framework introduced in 2013. And the labor shortage that started to emerge at around that time. Then they rose sharply in wages, in 2023 to 2024, probably in response to the recent global inflation and continuation of the easing framework. The strengthening of the price-wage cycle led to the change in the policy framework, as I said at the outset. Now, going forward, our primary objective is to achieve 2% inflation in a sustainable way. Thus far, we have made progress in moving away from zero and lifting inflation expectations. But we must now re-anchor them at the 2% inflation target. We will proceed cautiously as to other central banks with our inflation targeting frameworks. While many of the challenges we face are similar to those experienced by our counterparts, some are uniquely difficult for us. If I could touch upon just one example, finding out where the neutral interest rate R star is very difficult. Of course, estimating it accurately is challenging for any central bank. But it is particularly so in Japan, given the prolonged period of near-zero short-term interest rates. Although real interest rates have exhibited some fluctuations, the absence of significant nominal interest rate movements poses a considerable obstacle in assessing the economy's response to changes in interest rates. Last but certainly not least, I hope the discussions at this conference today and tomorrow will offer some valuable takeaways for the central bank community and be of some help going forward. Thank you for your kind attention.